Yeah, and you don't have to register that.
No.
Some of those air rifles is like a 22 long rifle or 227.
Yeah.
Powerful.
What about things like crossbow pistols and stuff like that?
Crossbows, you don't have to register. Well, you do have to have a permit to use one hunting. I know that. But it used to be only handicapped people had permission to have a permit. But now anybody can, I think. And but you got to follow bow season. You don't follow rifle season with it, which bow season's longer anyway. Okay, hey Madison, how are you? Everybody's giving me the same response today. It's been a bad Wednesday. I'm taking it.
Must be something in the air. I mean, I'm gonna stay joyful no matter what, but I'll tell you, it was challenging today at work.
I think that
personally, relationally.
Yeah, I think we've reached a point of being tired. We've had to keep up a pretty high level of energy. Yeah, and I think we're to the point where we're kind of all hitting hit that wall at the same time. And I remember during the flood, it took about 2 months before you begin to see. Everybody was real patient with each other. They could deal with anything. But after about 2 months, everybody was ready for it to be over and started getting short with each other. And when we had all that stuff set up in here, it really got to be a challenge. And I think we're to that now after this hurricane. People are just tired. Tired of dealing with stuff. Tired of riding down the road and, just seeing trash everywhere. We're just tired of it. Just tired of it.
You can see those.
And more traffic. Yeah.
Big trucks.
We were picking up kids a while ago. Yeah. And I mean, I had to wait 5 minutes to turn right. Traffic coming up from the south, and I know it was because they had it stopped down there loading debris, somewhere, and everybody stopped, and so they're all mad. Everybody's mad. Everybody's tired. So Madison could write a song about it. Make $100,000.
That knows how to install glass in cars.
So many songs.
They know how to install glass in cars. I work on radiators. I have a shop.
Yeah, cats get all the good songs.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch all that. You're looking for an installer.
She needs an installer that knows how to install windows and knows how to work on radiators. It's a place where I take my car. She's been trying to find somebody for about 3 weeks now. She is stuck there. She's behind like 30 different windshield installations and stuff.
There's lots of people who don't want to work.
And you can't get glass. There's no glass to get.
But she's got the glass. She don't have installers.
Oh, really? We can't get the glass.
When I went to get mine taken care of a few months back, I had to wait almost 2 weeks for a windshield to come in.
Yeah, she's got the stuff. You just.
All right. So let's carry on here. We're in chapter 4, 2 Kings.
Did we notice olive oil? Did we notice olive oil?
Olive oil. This whole little section here, when we look through it, it looks like, why is all this written down in the Bible? It just seems like stories about Elisha and the miracles that he does. But there's some more here that we need to pay attention to and figure out. Because just like Samuel and to a large extent David and some of these other prophets that come along, Elijah, we know right away that this is God's man. This is God's representative on earth. And we begin to see some characteristics in Elijah and also in Elisha, and we see him in Jesus. But Jesus is head and shoulders above, but there's characteristics about him that overlap. And there's some things that happen to Jesus and to Elisha that begin to overlap, and we begin to think, maybe some of what the gospel writers wrote, they were borrowing. That's one of the first things that critical commentators begin to look at. But what it actually is, in my opinion, and in the opinion of some other commentators, is that when God becomes active in human history through men, some things are apt to repeat themselves. And not just because of the limitation of people, but because God provides repetition so that we're able to recognize what he's doing. And repetition helps us do that. So when we read a story and it'll say the same thing 3 or 4 times, because we're not too slick. We got to hear it 3 or 4 times to finally get it. But also it draws attention to those very important things. So some of that happens in this. The other thing that happens is in these particular stories that we're going to look at, there's 4 of them, I think, if we get that far, is that there's an activity that has to be done by the person who is receiving the blessing from God. So there we find in this that there's a cooperative effort, and the effort that the person puts in quite often determines the outcome. Okay, so it's not only God at work determining the outcome, it's how the person responds to what God is about to do. So that requires some anticipation, it requires some careful following of instruction, and those are all teaching things too that we need to hang on to. So verse 1 says, now a wife of one of the prophets, remember in Jericho, all the prophets came out and Elisha was able to heal the spring of water that had been polluted with the salt. Okay, so this is one of the wives of those prophets. She appealed to Elisha for help, saying, your servant, my husband, is dead. So one of these prophets had died and left a widow and a son, I think. So he says, you know that your servant was a loyal follower of the Lord. Now the creditor is coming to take away my 2 boys to be his servants. So we come across this often. We've done it in the past, haven't really called a lot of attention to it. But here it is attention. She says, you know that my servant was a loyal follower to the Lord. Okay, so we read this and we think, well, of course God's going to bless this man because he was loyal to him all this time. So we have to hang on to that peg, because when we get to Naaman over here, Naaman's a pagan and God's blessing him too. So the writer is helping us understand that, these people that have served the Lord faithfully all their life and these that have just now discovered what that means are treated in the same way. So tuck that away under your hat. That hat. Okay. So Elisha says to her, what can I do for you? Tell me what you have. Tell me what you do have in the house. And she answered, your servant has nothing in the house except a small jar of olive oil. All right, so olive oil was valuable. It was used for everything. It took a lot of olives to make a small jar of olive oil. And so what she had was precious, but it wasn't enough to pay off her debt. And besides, she really was offering something that she needed herself every day. So she gives up the olive oil. She's really going to have absolutely nothing now. All right. He said, and this is the activity part on her behalf, go and ask all your neighbors for empty containers. Get as many as you can. So go and close the door behind. Get as many as you can. Go and close the door behind you and your sons. Put the olive oil into all the containers. Set aside each one when you have filled it. So she left him and closed the door behind her and her sons. As they were bringing the containers to her, she was pouring the olive oil. Now she had a small jar, and now she's got this room full of containers that she's collected from her friends, and she keeps pouring out of the small jar, and it keeps filling all these containers. That's what's going on here. When the containers were full, she said to one of her sons, bring me another container. But he answered her, there are no more. So that just tells us this is the end. This is all that can be done. Then the olive oil stopped flowing. Nothing left in the jar. She went and told the prophet, And he said, go sell the olive oil, repay your creditor, and then you and your sons can live off the rest of the profit. All right, so what do we have here?
Miracle.
A miracle.
Yeah.
We have God's abundance, okay, being poured out when she was prepared to receive it. So God's abundance does very little good in the world, okay, unless there's someone ready to receive it. And then to use it in a way that is going to actually accomplish what it is meant to accomplish. All right? So she does her part. She gathers up these containers. She's ready to receive what God is offering, and he gives as long as there is the need to give and as long as there's the opportunity to give. But when the opportunity was over, when the jars were full, he stops. So what does this teach us about God?
You got to be prepared for the miracle.
Yeah, we don't go off asking God for blessings and our heart not be prepared to receive it, because he's not going to do it. And so very often in this world we get disappointed with God. Oh God, I asked for this, I asked for that, and you didn't deliver. And God said, where's your jars?
I like it when they're praying for Peter to be delivered, and who was it that
Rhoda?
Yeah, I went to the door like his hair. Like,
Yeah, nobody
girl,
believes it.
Chill, we're praying for God.
Yeah, we're praying for
There's
him.
no way.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
So yeah, same thing. Only more extravagant. So God's extravagant in what he does, but when we begin to expect something for God and we're not prepared to receive and then to use that properly, then we're setting ourselves up for failure, or more pointedly, we are setting God up for failure. And he never fails. We tell ourselves that, but we find ourselves in situations where, man, God just didn't deliver. And God's saying, yeah, you didn't go get the buckets. You didn't go get the containers. You didn't do anything to get ready for this. You just expected me to show up and take care of stuff. All right? So that's what's going on here. She went and told the prophet, and he said, go and sell the olive oil, repay your creditor. And then what happens? Then you keep what's left over, the profit part, and you live off of it. So she only needed so much. All right? God didn't say, go get this many jars. He said, go get as many as you can. So God's desire in this is not to just meet the need, but to go beyond the need so that she has enough to live off of. What does that accomplish for a widow in these days? Peace. That's the word. That's the word. She has peace. It's just like before when Asa and Jehoshaphat did what God wanted, there was peace on every side. They had what they needed to live life. And here, God provides this abundance of oil, pays off the creditor. She gets to keep her sons, and she has peace on every side. So we begin to see, both in the big stories, whole nations having peace, and in the tiny micro stories where individuals have peace, where God is at work in all of these things. And the outcome is generally the same. Okay? And it occurs in the moment that we enter into this intimacy where we're doing what he needs us to do in order to receive him. So we say prepare our hearts. That's not a cliche, really. It is a cliche, but we shouldn't use it as a cliche. We should be able to really look at that and say, I am preparing my heart. I do want to receive this. And sometimes it means that we gotta go get some things to put in our life. All right? There's nothing more critical to preparing your heart for God than reading his word. It's like there's another example I gotta talk about. Because I've already decided when my dad passes away, and he's 94, so I'm not being morbid here. He's probably listening. I've got this passage of scripture in the Psalms, and it talks about going through the valley of Baca. And in the valley of Baca, there's this pilgrim, and he's moving through, and he digs wells along the way so that when the rains come, the wells will be filled up with water so that the travelers that come behind him will have enough water to travel through the valley of Baca. The valley of tears is what it, I don't know if they know for sure what the word means, but I think that's what most people decide that it means. And so here's this traveler, and he's preparing for the blessings of God, the rain that's going to fill these. And he doesn't even, it's not even for him, see? And that describes my dad's life. I mean, he spent his whole life just preparing wells to be filled with God's blessing. And everybody that knows him has been blessed by that. So if you listen to that, you get to hear your own funeral in a very thumbnail way. But anyway, so this is kind of what's going on here, is that God has instructed her to prepare, and in the process, she's just overly blessed. I probably could have said that in 2 sentences, but I get excited about it.
I'll tell you a funny little story. I really wasn't going to bring it up, but I'm going to bring it up because it relates to the lesson. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was strongly impressed. You people talk about how God told them this or God told them that. I didn't have a verbal impression, but I had an impression that God gave me to prepare for not having disposable plates. I mean, it seems odd, and it seemed odd at the time. He said, start buying plastic plates, and I'm going to give you a dishwasher. Okay? Now, all right, so I told the guy, actually John, and I told Burke and Mike at the CR, I said, look, God's going to give us a dishwasher, and I'm going to buy some plates, and I've already priced what it would cost at the restaurant supply place for the silverware and stuff like that, and I got a busing pan, okay, which was one of the things that he's told me to get, the plates and the busing pan. Wait a minute. Okay, so last Saturday, and I saw that he showed me the dishwasher. It was a dishwasher with a chrome front. Last Saturday, somebody gave me a dishwasher with a chrome front. Okay? I talked to my mother today, and she said, you better get up on your paper products because the truck drivers, at Sam's right now, they're only letting you buy so much paper products because the truck drivers don't want to carry the paper products because they don't have weight and they take up too much space. Mm-hmm. She says things like toilet paper you need to go and get. So she's telling me there's going to be a shortage of
things
paper
like everything.
Plates.
Yeah.
There's going to be a shortage of paper plates. We're not going to be able to get paper plates. Now, if you let me hook up the dishwasher, that's up to you. If you don't, we'll wait till the paper plates run out and I'll hook up the dishwasher. But this is not, I'm not playing with this. This is not a joke. I'm not kidding.
Right.
This really happened. The Lord led me to be able to provide for the fellowship meal, had me go buy plates. I've got about 35 plates in that storeroom right now. They're like 50 cents a piece. I bought them like 10 at a time, which is like, when I went shopping at Walmart, I just go grab 10 of the plates. So, $5 didn't make a difference to me in my purchase. So it didn't really cost me anything as far as I could see. The busing tray cost like $8 or $9. Okay, so I haven't spent any money. All right, and then this dishwasher just popped up.
Yeah.
So I have a dishwasher in the back of my truck.
That's fantastic.
Now, if you don't let me install it, Margie will get a dishwasher.
I don't know where to put it.
Well,
but we'll
I
deal with
would
that
put
later.
it right next to the refrigerator, across from where the water source is. On the other side of the wall from the water source.
That's where my ice machine's going, though. Maybe we can put them both there.
Machine in there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we can stack them. I didn't know you were getting an ice machine.
Yeah.
We're going to have a shortage of ice.
Well, we'll have 100 pounds at a time. So I have to go to Joey's and get ice when I don't have it. Yeah, and they're on sale right now, actually.
Ice
So
makers. Good.
And it needs a water source as well?
Yeah, and a drain. But we could put them side by side. Just have to rearrange those shelves in there. But yeah, sounds good.
I just thought that was the strange, well, I won't say strange, I just thought that was an amazing thing.
Yeah.
That he would show me that we were going, I was somebody, he said he was going to provide. This is something that I didn't hear it in a verbal manner.
Right.
It was impressed upon me that this was going to happen, and it did.
Yeah.
It was impressed upon me. I mean, it's something little. You know, it's not like, you know, the rain's going to come down and I need to build an ark. You know?
Yeah.
But it was something that may turn out to be necessary.
No, that's right. Very well could. All right, we're going to move on. But yeah, that's pretty cool, Kevin.
But I had to prepare for it.
Yeah.
It was like there was something I had to do. If I was going to get the dishwasher, I had to go buy the plates and the bus tray. I don't know why the bus tray, but I have it. It's in there. The bus tray and the plates are in that little pantry right now.
Well, it is. That's a lesson in listening, is what it is, and acting. And we all probably have those more than we know. Verse 8. One day Elisha traveled to Shunem. All right, Shunem is where the Shunammite lady was that Elijah helped. Where a prominent woman lived, okay? Prominent means what?
Had money.
She's got money, that's right. She insisted that he stop for a meal. So whenever he was passing through, he would stop in there for a meal. She said to her husband, "Look, I'm sure that the man who regularly passes through here is a very special prophet." Now get this. She meets Elisha. There's something about him that she likes or is impressed by, so she invites him to dinner, but she doesn't know who he is. That's the best of Middle Eastern hospitality right there. Doesn't matter who you are, you're welcome in the home. So she said, "Let's make a small private upper room and furnish it with a bed, table, chair, and lamp. When he visits us, he can stay there." So the things that she lists this is his second home, maybe his only home. But they list these things to let us know that this is more than just a traveler's room. He can come and call this his place. So one day Elisha came for a visit. He went into the upper room and rested. He told his servant, Gehazi, "Ask the Shunammite woman to come here." So he did so, and she came to him. And Elisha said to Gehazi, "Tell her, look, you have treated us with such great respect." So this is one of the big things in Middle Eastern culture. Treating each other with this depth of respect. Remember when the kids came out and called him Old Baldy?
Yeah.
Yeah, no respect. When Elijah, when the king sent out the three groups of 50 soldiers and they were trying to boss him around and he struck them dead, no respect. Okay, but here we have respect, and it's rewarded in a way. So respect is a thing as we read that we should pay attention to and look for. So what can I do for you? He's asking. Can I put in a good word for you with the king or the commander of the army? Now he's in Shunem, and it's just to the northern edge of the northern kingdom. And so he's saying, look, the king in Samaria, the city of Samaria, is some 70 miles away. If there's something I can do for you, you just let me know. Because I'm in good with the king. He doesn't always like what I have to say, but I can get there. So she replied, "I'm quite secure." So he asked Gehazi, "What can I do for her?" Gehazi replied, "She has no son, and her husband is old." Isn't that nice to hear? We don't know how old she is, but she has no son. So Elisha said to him, "Ask her to come here." So he did so, and she came and stood in the doorway, and he said, "About this time next year, you will be holding a son." She said, "No, my master. O prophet, do not lie to your servant." The woman did conceive, and at the specified time the next year, she gave birth to a son, just as Elisha had told her. So, familiar story. First time we hear about this, it's the angel of the Lord that comes and speaks to Abraham and Sarah, right? Secondly, it's Hannah, and when she goes to see old Eli, and she's praying for a son, and Eli says, "The Lord's told me you're going to have a son." And now we have this episode. So this is the third time that something of a miraculous birth has been foretold. The boy grew, and one day he went out to see his father, who was in the harvest with the worker, who was with the harvest workers. He said to his father, my head, my head. And his father told a servant, "Carry him to his mother." So she picked him up and took him to his mother. He sat on her lap until noon, and then he died. So most people speculate about what happened to this boy. Okay, most people say he had a heat stroke out there. He's too young to be there, and he's out in the middle of the noonday sun, the morning heat, and he just had a heat stroke and died. She went up and laid him down on the prophet's bed. Now, the only way that the lady would now know that Elisha is a prophet is by evidence by the son. She doesn't know who he is before. He offers to do this thing for her, and she says, "No, I'm fine." And he says, "Well, you're going to have a son." So now the boy is not only proof of God's blessing for her, but proof of who Elisha is. Okay, so Elijah is as intimately involved in the boy's life being there as is the mother or God. So she takes him up to Elijah's bed, to the prophet's bed. She shut the door behind her and left. All right, second time in this story we hear about shutting the door behind. All right, so let's just stop for a minute. What is that about? Why does the writers keep telling us that the door was shut? The door was shut when they were pouring the oil. The door was shut when the boy's laying here dead in the bed. Okay, so when we look at the first miracles that Elisha did in chapter 2 and 3, very public, the things that he did. Okay, out in the open. There kind of was an announcement of who Elisha was. He now had taken Elijah's place, and he was God's man, and he had the power of God. Well, in these instances, it's all being done in secret. So meaning the door was closed, and they left. The door was closed behind him. So here we got these two contrasting ideas, or comparative ideas, that give us the full breadth of how God is working in his people. There are times when it is very public and is almost evangelistic in nature as to what God is doing, and other times it's just done behind closed doors.
Well, that's also in the case of Jesus with the lame man. He told him to pick up his mat, but just be quiet about it. Don't tell anybody.
And Jairus' daughter, he sends everybody away. They're laughing at Jesus by the time he tells them she's just asleep. And he sends them all away and shuts the door, and he does the same thing. So these stories reiterate, or the Jesus stories reiterate the way that God chooses to do these things. He's not always announcing his glory for all the world to see. He is allowing his glory to be known in a very intimate and personal way for the person to experience it, so that it becomes a part of who they are. But we hadn't gotten there yet. Poor kid, he's still laying there dead. She called to her husband, "Send me one of the servants and one of the donkeys so I can go see the prophet quickly and then return." And he said, "Why do you want to go see him today? It's not a new moon or a Sabbath," meaning this is not a holy day. All right? She said, "Everything's fine." So the inference of the question is there must be something wrong if you want to see him today. And she says, "No, everything's fine." She saddled the donkey and told her servant, "Lead on." Do not stop unless I say so. Now, she just lied to her husband. You know how big of a no-no that was in these days? Okay, he could easily have requested her stoning for that. Okay, so she's risking, or is she risking?
Yeah, is she risking?
Is she risking? How much does she believe in Elijah's ability as a man of God? Okay, so we can say that she's rolled the dice and she's laid it all out there.
So she hasn't told her husband that the boy's dead?
No, boy, the husband doesn't know.
Everything's fine.
He's laying up in the upper room, in Elijah's room, and everything's fine. And she runs off and get him. So she went to visit the prophet at Mount Carmel, which is not so far. Oh, by the way, I found a map and I put it in the resource thing on the Church Center app if you're using that. But Mount Carmel's way to the west, and Shunem is probably 15, 17 miles away. When he saw her at a distance, he said to his servant Gehazi, "Look, it's the Shunammite woman. Now run to meet her and ask her, 'Are you well? Are your husband and the boy well?'" So her presence with Elisha raises the same kind of question. Something must be wrong. He's in tune with the husband. The husband thought something was wrong. Now Elisha's thinking something is wrong. She told Gehazi everything's fine. So now she knows everything's not fine, but she does know everything is fine as soon as she can get to Elisha. Okay. So here it is. This is God's man. There's no substitute. She's not going to settle for a substitute. But when she reached the prophet on the mountain, she grabbed hold of his feet. Gehazi came near to push her away, but the prophet said, "Leave her alone. She is very upset," or she is captured in her grief is a better way to say that.
Deeply troubled.
Yeah.
Mine says bitter distress.
Yeah. Bitter. Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
And that even comes maybe closer. The Lord has kept this matter hidden from me. He didn't tell me about it. So now Elisha is feeling a little uneasy because what is happening in this woman's life, he doesn't even know yet what's happened. But she knows that Elisha is the solution. Although she is distressed and bitterly upset about it, she knows that she's come to the right place. And then she begins a series of questions that we hear at the graveside of Lazarus in some way, shape, or form. She said, did I ask my master for a son? No. Didn't I say, don't mislead me? Yes. And Elisha said to Gehazi, tuck your robes into your belt, take my staff, and go. So he knows now that something's happened to the boy. And he wants Gehazi to go before him with his staff. And tells him, go, don't stop to exchange greetings with anyone. Place my staff on the child's face. All right? The mother of the child said, as certainly as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. So Elisha got up and followed her back. So we've heard that line before, right? Where did we hear that line before?
Where Jesus follows the...
No. But earlier here.
Oh, okay.
Where with Elijah and Elisha. Remember? Elijah keeps telling him, I'm going on to so-and-so, you wait here. And Elisha kept telling him this very thing. As long as you and the Lord live, I will never leave you. So here, the test that was put to Elijah, are you going to be loyal and faithful? To Elisha. Are you going to be loyal and faithful to Elijah? Are you going to go as far as you need to go in order to receive what you've already asked God for? That was a double blessing of Elisha's strength and power in the Spirit. So this lady, we already know the lesson. The writers let us know already that, Elisha was rewarded for being steadfast and true and not quitting. He went all the way. And here we have the same lesson. We know what happens when someone does this. Good things happen. So she says, she doesn't know what happened before, but we're kind of on the outside looking in, and we're able to know. As certainly as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you, meaning that I've put everything in you. So Elijah got up and followed her back. Now Gehazi went on ahead of them. He placed the staff on the child's face, but there was no sound or response. When he came back to Elisha, he told them the child did not wake up. When Elisha arrived at the house, there was the child lying dead on his bed. Hang on to the Gehazi thing because it comes important later. As a reminder, you remember especially the writers of Samuel and Kings like to give us a little hint about a person, and then later it comes into full form. So one example of that was when David escaped to the priest and asked for the bread of sacrifice to eat, and the priest didn't want to give it to him, but he did, and then finally he asked him for a sword, and he says, "Yeah, I have Goliath's sword." And so David goes to the priest and he gets everything he needs to sustain himself and to become a mighty warrior. Well, hiding there was Doeg. And so Doeg goes back and tells Saul all this. And then later Saul sends Doeg and he kills all the priests. And so he introduces Doeg in this very insignificant way. But Doeg, hidden behind the curtain, hears all this. And then later Doeg goes back to that very same place with a sword and butchers all the priests. So this is the same kind of thing. We get those stories along the way where we get a hint of someone to kind of keep our radar out for what's coming. And this is one of those times, I think. So he got up on the bed and spread his cover. Then he prayed to the Lord. He got up on the bed and spread his body over the boy. He put his mouth on the boy's mouth, his eyes over the boy's eyes, and the palms of his hands against the boy's palms. As he bent down across him, the boy's skin grew warm. Elisha went back and walked around in the house. So it's like he did that, but he didn't quite get it done. So it's like he took a break or something. But he goes and he walks around in the house. Then he got up on the bed again and bent down over him. The child sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Okay, so did he sneeze 7 times? I don't know. What's the significance of sneezing 7 times?
Got all the demons out.
He got his demons out.
It's hard.
It's the utter perfection of God's work, and it's demonstrated in this sneezing 7 times. Okay. So there's the 7th time, and then what happened on the 7th day in God's universe? He rested. Everything was brought to completion. Life was settled in God's creation. Same thing here. 7 times the boy comes back to life. Life is settled for the boy. It's complete now. It's perfect. Elisha called to Gehazi and said, "Go tell the Shunammite woman." So he did so, and she came to him. He said to her, "Take your son." She came in, fell at his feet, and bowed down. Then she picked up her son and left. So she put everything she had on Elisha, and Elisha didn't fail. And that one little sentence that's tucked away in the middle of the closing episode is, and Elisha prayed to the Lord. So his very purpose for being there, he accomplished not just in the healing, but in being God's man and asking him. And that's what made the difference. And I think that's the reason why it says he did all of that, and the body got warm, but it didn't quite do it. So he went back and did some more. The participation that Elisha is in that matters in the sense that God is able to work through it. And that becomes part of the lesson here that we don't want to just run by. And the woman recognizes that because she falls to his feet and she bows down as though it's God himself there. So, another story. Here we get two more in chapter 4.
One question.
Okay.
On the index down here, going, from my passage to this down here, on 421, it said the woman's action kept her son's death a secret from others and demonstrated her confidence in Elisha's ability to do a miracle. How do we know up here that she kept it quiet? That she didn't tell him? Where did it say that?
Well, she never tells her husband. She never tells anybody. Yeah, the servant doesn't know. No one knows.
She just told her.
She said everything's fine.
Close the door
She sent
behind
a
her.
message to her husband. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because he's asking. Something must be wrong.
Yeah.
She wants to go get the holy man, and it ain't even a holy day.
Okay.
And then Elijah knows something's wrong because she's in such distress
Got it.
until she finally says, why did you set me up for failure? You gave me a son, and now I am utterly destroyed. My heart is utterly broken. I was happier. She could be saying this. I was happier before without him, but now I've experienced this great joy, and you've taken that from me.
All right.
And then he says, well, what does he say? He doesn't say anything. He's as pastoral as he can be in her distress, and he prays to God, and he does what God obviously instructs him to do, and he comes back to life. Now, that story and the New Testament story, you just can't separate the two theologies. We are here and we have our life, but our life is destroyed. There's nothing to it. Our sinful life condemns us to where we're never going to be with God or anything that we love. And God comes along with his son, and he pays a price for that, and everything is made right. He literally places his blood over us to cover our sin so that we can live again. Elisha covers the boy with his body, and he's raised to life again. Now, these kind of things that we begin to pick up in Scripture, God is saying, this is how you really learn about who I am. There's not just, you got a problem and there's a solution. You've got a real problem, and I've been stating for 6,000 years the solution. You can't just run and say that I just decided all of a sudden that this is how I was going to deal with your sin problem. I've been illustrating for you and showing you and accomplishing it time after time after time. And so we find them, and at least I do. I love it when I do. 38 says, now Elisha went back to Gilgal. Remember, Gilgal is where the ark originally was after the Philistines stole it. And it sat there for a long time. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with it because they were afraid it would bring pestilence and disease upon them. So it became a holy place. Gilgal's always had this special place all the way through the histories that we've read so far, and will continue to do so in varying degrees. So he went back to Gilgal while there was a famine in the land. So first time we hear about a famine, this is toward the southern end of the northern kingdom. Some of the prophets were visiting him, and he took his servant, and he told his servant, put the big pot on the fire and boil some stew for the prophets. Someone went out to the field to gather some herbs and found a wild vine. He picked some of its fruit, enough to fill up the fold of his robe. He came back, cut it up, and threw in the slices into the stew pot, not knowing that they were harmful. So this guy goes out and he's looking for herbs to season the stew, comes up with something that's poisonous, and cuts it up and throws it in the stew. The stew was poured out for the men to eat. When they ate some of the stew, they cried out, death is in the pot, O prophet. They could not eat it. He said, get some flour. if you're going to fix a bad meal, just put a little roux in the pot. Get some flour. Then he threw it into the pot and said, now pour some out for the men so they can eat. There was no longer anything harmful in the pot. So how unlikely would it be that a little bit of flour thrown in the pot is going to fix the problem? Okay.
Hey, Paul did it all the time.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a good roux, it'll fix the problem. But the other place in this series of Elisha stories comes when the Shunammite woman is playing host to Elijah, and all she has left is a little oil and a little flour. And he says, look, go ahead and fix me a cake because that's never going to run out. And so the flour never runs out. It becomes as much a life-giving source as does the oil that we just experienced, as does water from a spring, okay, that he healed in Jericho. So flour, oil, water all become significant ideas about overcoming the damage that's been done, or the disease, or whatever it might be. In this case, the bad food, and he uses the flour in order to allow the food to provide the life that it's to provide. So those are three elements that occur here, and then we see them again later. And we also see it in the Exodus, the night of the Passover. They ate what? Unleavened bread. And what's it made with? Oil, flour, and water. Okay. So now all three of these elements have been introduced as giving life. And all three were brought together in the unleavened loaf, and they actually allowed for life. The death angel passed over because they had observed this Passover meal together. So, yeah.
When I was younger, we didn't have any money. We make it flour, water, and a little bit of cooking oil. We make pancakes.
Yeah.
Eggs, nothing in it, but
Yeah, I just found out recently that they allow you to put oil in it too when you make it. I mean, honey. And I didn't know that because I make it for the Lord and the unleavened bread.
Oh, okay.
So even they didn't like it. So they had to sweeten it up. Nobody likes it, but they eat it because it reminds us of these three things. They come together. Yeah. So now he's going to feed some people. So now a man from Baal, Shalisha, or Shalit, I don't know how to say it. Shalisha sounds too much like a name. Brought some food for the prophet, 20 loaves of bread made from the first fruits of the barley harvest, as well as fresh ears of grain. Now, according to the law, which there is no law being practiced in the land right now because it's all pagan practices that they're on. Nobody's worshiping at the temple. You can read all the way through these, and it's been a long time since anybody's worshipped at the temple in Jerusalem. And then, of course, they've never had one in the northern kingdom, so they're not worshiping any god. But the first fruits of the bread and produce were to go to the priest in the temple. That was their cut because they didn't have a land to grow anything. They depended on their brothers to bring them food. And so here it is. It is as if the writer is acknowledging the only priest that is in the land is this group that Elijah has with him. So he brings 20 loaves of bread from the first fruits of the barley harvest, as well as fresh ears of grain. Elisha said, "Set it before the people so that they eat it." But his attendant said, "How can I feed 100 men with this?" Any of this sound familiar? He replied, "Set it before the people so they may eat. For this is what the Lord has said, they will eat and have some left over." So he set it before them. They ate and had some left over, just as in the Lord's message. You've heard this story, haven't you? Yeah. Yeah, twice now. Once with the oil. Okay. And in Jesus. We know that story. So the same thing's happening here, only with Jesus' story. With what happens there with the bread, there's how many baskets? 12 baskets. So this is for this little band of priests, but when Jesus does it, it's for the whole nation. Okay? So yes, it's the same familiar story. And what does it illustrate for us here? Same thing it illustrates for Jesus when he does it. There's an abundance that God is ready and able to provide, but we have to be willing to accept that it's going to be that way. If they would have said, no way, we can't, no way. After Elijah had already said, but this is the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord said. It's just not enough, Elisha. You know, you're making yourself look silly, and you're making God look silly. I mean, come on. Okay, so that's not being prepared. But they're obviously prepared. And so the same thing happened with Jesus' story. Who wasn't prepared? His disciples. Okay? But how does Jesus change their attitude about it? Here we kind of get a little upside down here. Because he just does it. They're not ready. They're not ready at all to have happen what is happening. Okay? So here we have, and under this old covenant, God says, be prepared. You've got to be prepared because I can't act until you're prepared. Well, when Jesus comes, he says, I'm here to prepare you, and you cannot be prepared until I go through what I must go through to prepare you. I have to be prepared first. So when Hebrews says that he was perfected in his sufferings, what Hebrew is saying is Jesus had to be prepared for what he was becoming. He couldn't just say that he was going to be a Savior. He had to undergo being a Savior. And so it kind of gets turned on its head a little bit, okay? But there's still preparation that's being done. It's just that when it comes to life everlasting, we're incapable of preparing. There's nothing in us to do it. So Jesus comes and does it. And then he says, you just believe that I did it. That's all you got to do. And the implication is anybody can do that. Anybody can trust in that. So we're left not thinking that, oh, there's got to be this rule or that rule, or I've got to do this or I've got to do that. Jesus has come and done all of it, and he says, now all you've got to do is trust it. And that's why it's the biggest no-brainer in all of human history, to trust Jesus. Because you can't find anything else ever in human history that's so easy to do and means so much. Okay. Let's try to get chapter 5 because it's a long narrative and there's I don't know. We may not be able to do it. There's a lot here.
Lot there.
All right. We're going to try. So Naaman is an important guy. He's the commander of the king of Syria's army. Pagan king, pagan Naaman. He was esteemed and respected by the king, his master, for through him the Lord had given Syria military victory. So the narrator is saying Syria is mighty because God is working through Naaman's life. God wants Syria to be mighty. And Naaman's the one leading the charge. But this great warrior had a skin disease. Raiding parties went out from Syria and took captive from the land of Israel a young girl who became a servant to Naaman's wife. She told her mistress, if only my master were in the presence of the prophet who is in Samaria, then he would cure him of his skin disease. So most people think. So Elisha's got this reputation that even servant girls know about his abilities. But yeah, many think it's leprosy. So Naaman went and told his master what the girl from the land of Israel had said. The king of Syria said, go, I will send a letter to the king of Israel. So Naaman went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 suits of clothes. He brought the letter to the king of Israel, and it read, this is a letter of introduction for my servant Naaman, who I have sent to be cured of his skin disease. So the king gets his letter and thinks, okay, the king of Syria, who's just whipped my butt in a battle and taken some of my people captive, expects me to heal this guy's skin disease. Which prompts his next thing. When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, am I God? Can I kill or restore life? Why does he ask me to cure a man of his skin disease? So the king is distraught and perplexed, and he literally he's in great grief and mourning because he knows what's going to happen if he doesn't complete this request. The king of Syria, he's a tough dude. So he says, certainly you must see that he is looking for an excuse to fight me, because he knows I can't do this. If I don't do it, he's going to come in here and raid us. When Elisha the prophet heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent this message to the king. Why do you tear your clothes? Send him to me so that he may know there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood in the doorway of Elijah's house. Elijah sent out a messenger who told him, go and wash 7 times in the Jordan. Your skin will be restored and you will be healed. So Elijah comes to the door. He doesn't even speak to Naaman. He doesn't even go down to meet him. He just looks at his servant and says, go tell him to do this. And he goes back in the house. Okay, no respect, right? So now we're getting the flip side. Elijah's been shown great respect by the Shunammite woman, but now he's showing no respect to the Syrian at all. So Naaman went away angry. He said, look, I thought for sure that he would come out, stand here, invoke the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the area, and cure this skin disease. So he's looking for, a shaman-like witchcraft type thing to go on where he says all the right words, and he waves his hand, and everything's going to be all right. So black magic, in a sense, He says the rivers of Damascus, Abana and Pharpar are better than any of the waters in Israel. Could I not wash in them and be healed? Couldn't he have just sent a message and told me to stay at home and do this? So he turned around and went away angry. Now his servant, Naaman's servant, approached and said to him, O master, if the prophet had told you to do some difficult task, you would have been willing to do it. It seems you should be happy that he simply said, wash and you will be healed. So here we are. No works involved. He doesn't have to do anything other than simply wash like he does every day. So he went down and dipped in the Jordan 7 times as the prophet had instructed. His skin became as smooth as a young boy's, and he was healed. So not only was he healed, he had soft, supple, beautiful skin. He and his entire entourage returned to the prophet. Naaman came and stood before him, and he said, for sure I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Okay, so now we got 2 things coming together. Remember where we talked about how Elijah had done these and Elisha had done these very public miracles, and they had all been done really with people of his own faith. And then he did these very private miracles, and we have no idea as to who the woman, what kind of belief she had, but we know that the others involved prophets. Now he's dealing with a pagan, and what the pagan is experiencing is nearly it results in an evangelistic effort, where what has happened now is he believes that there is only one God in all the earth. So what started out to be very private has now become a very public thing where he is announcing his belief in God, but then we're going to see that he has to return and things begin to change a little bit. So he says, now please accept a gift from your servant. But Elisha replied, as certainly as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will take nothing from you. Naaman insisted that he take it, but he refused. And Naaman said, if not, then please give your servant a load of dirt, enough for a pair of mules to carry, for your servant will never again offer a burnt offering or sacrifice to a god other than the Lord. So what is he doing? He says, then please let me carry some of this Israelite dirt back to my house, and I'm going to build an altar so that when I worship, I can worship. At least I know that I'm worshiping the Lord with land from the promise. Okay, that's basically what's happening here. May the Lord forgive your servant for this one thing. And he's already thinking ahead. When my master enters his temple of Rimmon to worship, and he leans on my arm, and I bow down in the temple of Rimmon, may the Lord forgive your servant for this. And Elisha says to him, in important words, go in peace. Now, every time we see that there's peace on every side, that there's restoration, there's any of that, we know that God's blessing and presence is in it. So Elisha is able to say to Naaman, God knows where your heart is. So the pomp and circumstance of worship, whatever it is, doesn't affect the heart. God knows who you are. So you can fake it either way, can't you? You can stand before God and not worship, or you can be in this situation where you're having to do something you know is not a part of your life anymore, and God recognizes that there's just situations in life that are that way. So I had a friend. He was a PA announcer at the high school, and at Louisiana College. He's an old guy, but we were just buddies. And he was Jewish, and his mother was a practicing Jew. Old school. And sometime, I don't know, in his mid-50s, I guess, he'd given his heart to the Lord. He'd shared that with the deacon body at my church. But he said, as long as my mother's alive, I cannot be baptized. It will kill her to know that that's what I've done. And so he didn't. Until his mother died, who was a sweet lady too, but she was almost an Orthodox Jew. They buried her on a Friday. Saturday was the Sabbath, and he was baptized on that Sunday. So he honored his mother, exactly what the law required of him to do, and he honored his Lord, in my opinion, by showing great love to her and great love for him in his baptism. And this is the same kind of thing in my mind that Naaman was given permission to do, because we often take that place where you've got to be like Daniel or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego for this to be real for you. Well, God's purpose in their activities standing before Nebuchadnezzar is different than the one that he had for Naaman and what he was doing here. And we have to respect that God deals with people and their situations differently. It's not all cookie cutter. And that makes it harder for us to understand sometimes, but it doesn't change the fact the way God works. And he does work that way. That makes sense?
Well, when you had children, and you had many children, or several children, do you treat every situation with every child exactly the same, or is that situation tailored to that particular child?
Yeah, and I can see where we could make mistakes and sin in that, but I don't want to ever project my behavior upon the way that God would be doing it. I think what happens here is that we're able to look at it and see how God does some things and say, yeah, there's some situations in people's lives with God that I may have to have a little different respect for than by just determining what that should be based on my experience with God. So it doesn't allow us to box people in, and really that opens up an opportunity to try to understand more, I would think. Does that make sense? So that we're not projecting, oh well, God does that because I do that. But what it is that I can see how God must do that in that situation with that person, and I can understand why he's chosen not to do it that way in my life. and we're still worshiping the same God, and we're still in the same faith, and we're still in the same place, but it's a different experience. We can even look at different faith traditions and say the same thing. Does God dishonor? Let's see, what's a good example without stepping on anybody's toes? Does God dishonor Catholicism? No. No, because I used to work with some, when I was at St. Jean V&A, man, we had Bible study every Thursday morning. And I mean, I knew those people's heart, without a doubt, you know. Did they have traditions that totally did not fit the way I do life?
Yeah, we did.
Absolutely. There's no way I could find myself in that. But they did. So I appreciated a lot about our time together when we would study Scripture together. And there was always an openness to learn from me. And I was the maintenance guy. So, you know, it was a special time. Anyway, so the rest of this we can finish up, but it's kind of like this. Naaman leaves, and Gehazi, the one that had the rod that laid it on the boy and nothing happened. I wanted you to hang on to that story because we're going to read it real quick. When he had gone a short distance, Naaman, Gehazi the prophet Elisha's servant thought, "Look, my master did not accept what the Syrian Naaman offered him." It means lots of money and nice bling clothes, you know. "As certainly as the Lord lives, I will run after him and accept something from him." So Gehazi ran, as certainly as the Lord lives. So he's called on the name of the Lord in this. As certainly as the Lord lives, I will run after him and accept something from him. So Gehazi ran after Naaman. When Naaman saw someone running after him, he got down from his chariot to meet him and asked, "Is everything all right?" Boy, here we get the great flip-flop contrast. Naaman's angry. He meets the Lord in his healing, and now he's getting down out of his chariot, humble before Elisha's servant Gehazi. He answered, "Everything is fine. My master sent me with this message." Look, now, is that the truth?
No.
That's a lie. "Look, 2 servants of the prophet just arrived from the Ephraimite hill country. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 suits of clothes." Naaman said, "Please accept 2 talents of silver." He insisted and tied up 2 talents of silver, 2 bags, along with 2 suits of clothes. He gave them to the 2 of his servants, and they carried them for Gehazi. So now, okay, 2 lies. My master sent me, and there's these new guys that they didn't have a chance to say if they wanted any of this stuff or not. And so, well, I've come to get it for them. So and then Naaman loans him 2 servants, okay, to carry the stuff. When he arrived at the hill, and that's a lot of discussion about the hill, but he arrived at a hill, he took them from the servants and put them in the house. So evidently the hill is a place that would have been between where Naaman was and where Gilgal was, okay? And he was able to hide, or he thought he was hiding, from Elisha. So he had a house there, he kind of hid this stuff. So I get this old Western picture where they're riding through the desert and they find the old ghost town and they hide their gold that they just stole off the stagecoach where nobody can see. Then he sent the men on their way. When he came and stood before his master, Elisha asked him, "Where have you been, Gehazi?" And he answered, "Your servant hasn't been anywhere." 3rd lie. So Elisha replied, "I was there in spirit when a man turned and got down from his chariot to meet you." So this was, remember where he said, "As sure as the Lord lives"? Okay. And the Lord says to Elisha, "I want you to know what's going on here in my name." So he reveals it to Elisha, and he says, "I was there in spirit." God, let me know everything that you are doing. This is not the proper time to accept silver or to accept clothes, olive groves, vineyards, sheep, cattle, and male and female servants. Why is this not the proper time? That's right. That's right. The man had experienced God in the midst of his suffering and in the midst of his healing. How can anything be as valuable as that? He says this is not the time to do that. When will be the time? When God provides it. That's when it's the proper time. Therefore, Naaman's skin disease will afflict you and your descendants forever. When Gehazi went out from his presence, his skin was as white as snow.
And he lost his job.
Yeah, he had to go find a job. And he couldn't find a job. And see for Naaman leprosy was not a sin in his culture. It was just a disease.
Right.
But for Gehazi now, he is wearing an incurable sin. He can't be with his people. He can't be with the community. He has to beg. See, everything that he was after.
Lost everything.
Yeah. And what had Naaman gone for? He had gone hoping to buy his way into the favor of God. And all God required of him was to listen to his word through his prophet.
Faith.
Yeah.
Faith.
Got to trust.
I wonder why there's no prophets now. In this time.
You want to know?
Yeah.
Because the New Testament says we're all prophets. So you're sitting in a room full of prophets.
Oh, okay.
We just don't behave like prophets.
No.
But because the word actually, the word prophetes in the Greek means to